who you are and how did you get to where you are now? But first, who are you? Who are you?
I'm Paddy McCafferty. I'm a Catholic priest, and I was born in Belfast. And I grew up in the Troubles, that we call it the Troubles in the north of Ireland, that began in 1969. And so, as I was growing up, they were really at their worst. Um, I was a victim of sexual abuse when I was a little boy, aged 4, up to 6 years old. It started when I was 4 with a babysitter,
Oh,
and it continued for a period. And there was another person in our neighbourhood who abused me when I was 6. And my earliest memories are of abuse. And this my very early memories are not happy childhood memories that children should have, boys and girls should have. They were being abused. They were of fear, and it marked my whole childhood. It overshadowed my childhood,
yes.
and I didn't have a normal. I wasn't a normal happy kid, and I was always withdrawn and anxious. My father said about me when I was 9 years old, because they called me Pat. Well, everybody else calls me Paddy, but at home they called me Pat. And my father, I overheard him saying to my mother, "Our wee Pat is carrying all the worries of the world on his wee shoulders."
Oh my
And
God.
I didn't understand what he was talking about, but it fitted. It sort of fitted with me. I sort of felt like that. That's what it felt like, even though I didn't understand what all the worries of the world meant.
Yeah.
But it fitted for me at that stage of life. And I grew up, and what normally, from I was a very young child, I wanted to be a priest. I felt called to be a priest. I was fascinated with God, with being in church. I loved to watch the priest on the altar at Mass, and I became an altar server when I was very young. I was only about 7 when I first served Mass for the first time.
Oh, that is young.
Yeah, and I have to say that my early experiences of priests in the church were very positive. They were very good men that I was blessed to know, who were inspiring, who were holy, who were everything what a priest should be. And that's what inspired me to want to be like them. And so I grew up wanting to be a priest. That was what I was going to do in life. I was going to become a priest. And through my teenage years, I went to, of course, school and so on and so forth. And at 18 then, I was accepted for the seminary to study for the priesthood for my home diocese of Down Connor, which is in the north of Ireland. It's the second largest diocese in Ireland after Dublin. So I began my studies, and everything was fine. I was very homesick when I went to study. I'd never been away from home before. And I began my studies, and everything was going okay, except for the homesickness. But there was this guy who was about to be ordained. He was a senior student, obviously. I was just starting off. And what I now know as grooming, he groomed me. And,
No.
yeah. And he became friendly with me. And he was good company. I enjoyed his company, and I thought he was funny, and so on and so forth. But after a while, it got pretty weird. It started to get weird, and he was. I know now he was grooming me.
Yeah.
He was very crude in how he would speak, and he sexualized conversations. And when I was 18, I looked about 12. And when I was in my early 20s, I looked to be about 15 or 16.
Oh.
I was very young looking. I was small. I'm only 5'5". I weighed about 112 pounds. I was very
And it's
slight.
nothing.
Yeah, I know. Well, this guy, he got ordained. He got ordained a priest, and I was the organist for his ordination, the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
He had attacked me twice in the last few weeks when we were in seminary, and he was going home to be ordained a priest. He attacked me twice in the college, but it wasn't all that serious. It was serious, but it was nothing compared to what was coming, you know. So he got me on my own.
Oh no.
The night before he was to be ordained a priest, and I had to stay overnight. But I thought, because all the other students had come up and were going to be singing with the parish choir, and they were all being sent out to different houses, different families were keeping them for the night, you know. And I thought I would be in a home with some family. But I asked him, it was getting late at night, and I asked him, where am I staying tonight? And he says, oh, you're staying with me.
Oh, just that is
Yeah.
creeping me out.
I know, it was terrible. It was horrific. I mean, and I was very nervous about that because of the two attempts he attempted previously, a few weeks previously, to sexually assault me. He did sexually assault me he attempted to on another occasion. And I was very afraid, obviously, but I couldn't get home because my father didn't drive a car. Plus, in those days, we didn't have mobile phones, cell phones.
No.
Where you could call your father and say, Dad, come and get me, you know. So I was stuck in a strange time, and it was in the years of trouble in the north of Ireland, and I couldn't get home. I mean, I was stuck. So he took me in his car to a flat that his uncle owned, and it was a 1-bedroom flat.
Oh.
Yeah, and I wanted to sleep on the sofa, but he wouldn't let me. He forced me to come with him into the bedroom where there was a double bed, and there ensued a night of terror, is the only way I can describe it. It was horrific. I ended up, when he had finished with me, I slept on the floor.
Oh,
I felt, I couldn't really sleep. And the next morning, I was in shock the next morning, and he was as if nothing happened. And this was the morning time, and the ceremony for his ordination was 3:00 in the afternoon. I had to get through to 3. I wanted just to go home. I knew another musician, and I felt like ringing him and saying, would you come and take over this event today, because I can't do it. I want to go home. But I didn't, and I got through it. And I was in a state of shock, and the shock would go on for a long, long time, really many years. And all I could think of when I was playing the organ and the choir there and the gallery, the organ gallery at the church, when I would look in the mirror, the organ has a mirror that you can see what's happening in the sanctuary, and I could see him on the sanctuary and the bishop and all the priests, and him lying, as a priest does, prostrate on the ground before the bishop lays his hands on him. And when he was lying prostrate on the ground, all I could think of was him on top of me the night before.
Ooh.
Him on top of me the night before. So I got through, and I just wanted to go home. And but anyway, I did eventually get home later that night, and but that was just the start of it. I mean, that was the beginning of a 3-year reign of terror, is how I would describe it.
3 years.
3 years.
Fairly.
It went on for 3 years, yeah, and it was the worst form of sexual abuse. It was rape. It was, very, very forceful. He would isolate me. He would get me. That would happen when I would be home from the seminary. And like I said, I was a very young-looking seminarian. I had the body and the build of a teenage boy, and he would come to our home, and in his car, and he would say, "Right, you're coming with me." And I knew what was coming. I knew what was going to happen, and I just couldn't do anything about it. It was,
Could you tell your parents
No, I couldn't.
Well,
I never told them. I never told them about the child. I never told them about the babysitter or the local guy. I never told them about that. And I certainly wasn't going to tell them or anybody about this man. His name was. I can say his name because he was eventually jailed, and it was all in the public domain. His name is James Donaghy, and I couldn't tell anyone because I was so ashamed
Yeah.
and I'm so afraid. I was afraid of him. I was afraid of this guy, and I would try to placate him, that he would not hurt me maybe so much, but he hurt. There was no way. He hurt me in the worst way that anyone could hurt a lad like I was.
Yeah.
And he was very manipulative. He was very domineering. He was very aggressive. He was larger than life character.
Yeah.
And he would come into our home and take over. He'd take over our house. And he'd
Yeah.
rude to my father in our own home. I mean, I couldn't tell my family until I was 40, 20 years ago.
Oh.
20 years ago. I had to because I took a breakdown. I was carrying that all my adult life.
So you were 40 years old, and then you could finally tell people, tell your family.
Then I could tell my family, yeah.
Oh.
I had to because I had a nervous breakdown and they knew there was something wrong. I had been putting a sticking plaster on a deep wound for years and years and years, And it stopped after 3 years when I was still a seminarian, and he left me. He just, my best friend, who is my best friend now, actually, it was him that saved me from him. Because he rang me one day to say, I'm coming to the college, to the seminary, and I didn't want him to come, and I was, I just wanted him to stay away from me at this stage. And I said to my best friend, look, this guy's coming, he's a priest, and I don't like him, and I don't want to be on my own with him. So my friend, it was arranged that this priest would come, Donaghy would come, and my friend was watching from a distance, and he saw me with him walking along, and he just came along as if by chance, and it worked out perfectly because my friend came along, and Donaghy, I introduced him to Donaghy. I said, this is my friend, and Donaghy put his hand out as if to shake my friend's hand, and my friend wouldn't shake his hand. My friend just eyeballed him, looked him up and down, as if, I know you're up to something, I don't know what it is, because I hadn't told my friend what it was, I hadn't told him. And I just said, I don't like this guy, and I'm very wary of him, and I'd like you to be with me, and it worked out. And Donaghy was spooked by my friend, and literally he disappeared, and I never had a problem ever again with him. He left me alone. He stayed away. And I eventually then after another few years, I got ordained a priest myself, and I was in the diocese, the same diocese as him, and he was very prominent. He was given great prominence by the then Bishop of Down and Connor, Patrick Walsh. He was appointed to all sorts of roles, and he was high up in the diocese. And as a young priest, I stopped going to conferences, to retreats, and congress events.
Just because of this guy. Yeah.
He was there, and I couldn't just. I felt sick. I felt angry. I was afraid that I would break down. I was afraid that I would attack him and punch his lights out.
Yeah.
But so I stopped going to everything, and I was the walking wounded. I was suffering as what I now know is post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep properly. I couldn't sleep in a bedroom. I had to sleep on a sofa in the sitting room with the television on, with the light on. I didn't feel safe in a bedroom. I had an eating disorder. I had bulimia. I was cutting myself, punching myself. I had nightmares, night terrors, suffering from anxiety and depression. I was on depression medication since my late 20s, and I carried all my life from he stopped doing it right up until I had a breakdown at the age of 40.
Yeah. And so what does that do to your trust?
Oh, very, very damaged. I mean, I was like, my doctor who I was attending, and I told him the whole story, and when he was prescribed antidepressant medication for me, and when I recovered from the breakdown, and I went for therapy in the USA, actually, in Massachusetts, which was funded by the diocese, although the Bishop Walsh that I mentioned,
Yeah.
he made me feel that size, and he made an issue about the expense, but he allowed me to go. He allowed me to go. And this particular bishop, I was afraid of him growing up. When I went to secondary school, he was the principal of the college, and he was a sadist, is the only way to describe it. He was a horrible, nasty, cruel individual. And I grew up from the age of 11, when we start secondary school in our system here. I was terrified of this man, as were so many others. So I was afraid of this bishop. He was my bishop. He became the bishop of our diocese, and I was afraid of him. I couldn't relate to him. I couldn't talk to him. In the year 2001, I'm jumping back a little bit, I had reported what had happened to me as a young seminarian through a senior priest to this bishop. I told him what had happened to me because I was concerned about another young kid whom I saw Donaghy interacting with, and I panicked. And I literally, I said, that kid's in danger. It's going to happen to him what happened to me. So I went to a senior priest that I trusted, and I told him my story, and I asked him to tell Bishop Walsh, and he assured me that he would, and he later told me that he had told him. And he told me exactly what Walsh had said. He told me that I was not to worry about it anymore, that it puts him in a bit of an awkward position with Father Donaghy, and that I did the right thing. And I accepted that, at the time. I had to. So jump forward to 2003 again. When I came back from America, this bishop would deny that the senior priest had told him. And that he would deny it. But this is you couldn't make this up, because he told me in 2003 that he hadn't been told, that it was all news to him, and he was horrified by it. That's before I went for the therapy in Massachusetts. When I came back, I met with him again, and he read me a letter in which he basically said, it's your word against Father Donaghy's word, and I have no further corroborating evidence, and therefore I can't make any judgment. That was a complete lie, because in the late 90s, this bishop was told that Donaghy had sexually abused a teenage boy in the mid-1980s. He sexually abused a teenage boy in the mid-1980s. And the previous year, 2002, this bishop had meetings. This is all verifiable. I have the documentation in my possession. This bishop in 2002 had meetings with Donaghy himself and with the family of another teenage victim.
Oh my!
A 14-year-old boy who he sexually abused for quite a long period of time, who was an altar boy. And he tells me, knowing about since the late 90s, about a teenage boy in one place, knowing in 2002 about a teenage boy in another place, and he tells me in 2003 it's your word against his, and I can make no judgment, and there's no other evidence. It was a complete lie.
But that's
lie.
Exactly how all those stories come into public, and how the Catholic Church has been
so damaged.
Oh my!
So, and that's not the half of it, because it rumbled on. I was horrified, obviously, when he told me. I mean, I had given them. They had just spent $10,500 on a therapist in America who was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful. And I had also worked in a parish while I was doing the therapy. It was tremendous. It was the best time of my life. And then I had come back and I had given a document, 55 pages, graphic detail of what I had suffered and what Donaghy had did to me. And it's my word against his, and he knows that there's other problems, and he refuses to act. So in March 2004, I got legal advice, because I hadn't got legal advice, but he was dealing with me through lawyers. And I got my own legal advice, and I was told that you have civil grounds for criminal proceedings against Jim Donaghy and for civil proceedings against Bishop Walsh. Criminal for Donaghy's abuse, civil for Walsh's neglect and negligence. So I communicated that to Walsh, and within days, Donaghy was removed from ministry within days.
Oh, so then he could get rid of
It
him.
wasn't on my complaint, and it wasn't on another victim's complaint. It was on the complaint of the teenage boy that he had had since the late 90s. And it took him at least 5 or 6 years to act on that complaint.
Whoa.
It's incredible. So that was okay. He was removed from ministry and the police got involved. There was an investigation. And in 2006, the Public Prosecution Service in Northern Ireland decided not to prosecute Donaghy because there was insufficient evidence to secure a conviction. So Walsh comes out, when this is announced publicly in the press, Walsh comes out with a very supportive, sympathetic statement about Donaghy, about a heavy burden having been lifted from his shoulders, and about great relief among his family, his friends, his parishioners, his fellow priests, that there's to be no prosecution. So I was horrified, and I was absolutely floored by this, and God only knows how the other lad felt whose case had not been prosecuted. So what happened then, I was wondering, why is Donaghy not back in his position if there's no prosecution and the heavy burden has been lifted off his shoulders, as Walsh said? And I couldn't understand, why is he not back as parish priest where he was? I now know why he wasn't, because also in 2006, a child of 7 came forward who was now an adult. Yeah, a 7-year-old boy who Donaghy had abused in 1989. Sexually abused him when he was 7, and he was now an adult. And in 2006, he came forward with his story, and so he wasn't put back in ministry, and this rumbled on for another 3 years until 2009, when I was contacted by the police, and they told me that another victim had come forward, and they had heard, I don't know how they heard, but they had heard on the grapevine that I may have had problems with this particular guy, Jim Donaghy. I says, yes, I did have problems, but I talked to the detective that night on the phone. It was December 2009. I talked to him for about 2.5 hours. I told him the whole story, and at the end of it, he asked me, do you want to do anything? And I said, of course I do, because I felt the guy who had come forward was the young person that I was worried about in 2001. He was a victim, I was right. And even in 2001, he had already been abused. It was too late. But I knew looking at how Donaghy was behaving, that he was another victim of this man. So I said immediately, oh, well, if he has come forward, I would be the biggest coward on earth. If I don't stand with him, I have to stand with him, and I did. And I said yes, and then I gave my statement to the police in the middle of December. It was just around near Christmas it was, actually. And I met with 2 detectives after Christmas in Dublin. I was based in Dublin at this stage. They read my statement to me and everything, and I signed it. And Donaghy, this is now 2010, when Donaghy was working abroad and he was coming home, he was not back, he never came back as a priest, despite Walsh's supportive statement of him and sympathetic statement. He was arrested at Belfast International Airport, taken into custody and charged with offences against me and against the other boy that I had been so concerned about back in 2001. 9 years later, this rumbles on for the year.
Still,
various appearances in court. He's pleading not guilty. He's denying what we are saying, and rumbles on for the whole year. In November and December, we're subpoenaed. We're subpoenaed to give evidence in the trial. January 2011, 24th of January to the 31st of January. On the 24th of January, the trial begins. I'm waiting to be called to give evidence. I'm steeled for what I know is going to be a terrible ordeal. And lo and behold, on the 31st of January 2011, I get a phone call from the detective who's liaising, keeping me posted, ringing me, Paddy, you don't need to come yet, it's all legal stuff going on at the minute. she rings me on the 31st of January of 2011 to say, Paddy, you're not going to believe what has happened here. The trial has been halted because the judge has been discovered to be a close personal friend of Bishop Walsh.
No.
Yes. And I says, what? And I says, who is the judge? And she said, Judge Gemma Loughlin. And I says, oh, I could have told you that if I had even thought to ask who is the judge. I didn't think I trusted the legal system that we would be given an impartial judge. But no, this woman, Gemma Loughlin, was the judge. Her and Walsh are like that. And I knew that as a priest of the diocese. I knew that. I knew that her and him were very close friends. And not only that, she, against the advice of the police, against the advice of the public prosecution service, who said these two boys don't know each other. They're telling exactly the same stories of what Donaghy did. That strengthens the case for the prosecution. We're in the business of convicting criminals. And this strengthens the case against this man that these two don't know each other and they're telling the same story. Loughlin ignored that advice and she severed our cases. She had concealed from the court a conflict of interest. A member of the public on a jury would be prosecuted for not disclosing. One of my best friends was with me to support me in the court, and he had to leave the court because a juror knew his wife, not him. She knew his wife, not him. This judge, Gemma Loughlin, sat for a week, having read the papers, as they're called, of evidence, the whole book of evidence, and she would have seen her close personal friend's name everywhere. And she severed our cases. Not only did she sever our cases, but she imposed a media blackout. There would be no reporting in the press. It would have been two separate trials in secret with two different juries. No one would have known this guy has other issues. Loughlin would have read the documents that I now have, the list of documents, which clearly show that Walsh knew of problems with this man way before my complaint in 2001. And he did nothing. And that in 2006, and Loughlin sat, knowing all this, and she would have seen all these, she sent for these documents, and they were given to her by the diocese, and she would have seen all this, and she still stacked the deck in favour of this man, later convicted, later found guilty, later pleaded guilty to the abuse of the 7-year-old boy. That's what we were dealing with. So the trial collapsed. Loughlin had to what's called recuse herself. She was forced into it. The chief prosecutor got suspicious. He was a wonderful man, and he, whenever, as he's called, Victim B's father asked him, this was Wednesday of the trial of the week, said, whose decision was it to sever the lad's cases? And he replied that was Judge Loughlin's own decision. And he jokingly said, I wonder how often she plays golf with Bishop Walsh. And it was a throwaway, jokey remark.
Yeah.
But it got the prosecutor suspicious. It aroused his suspicions. He went digging and he discovered the undisclosed friendship that she had not made known. She should never have been on the case.
No.
And she knows it. She should never have been on that case. I have said to this woman, I've written to this woman several times, I've confronted her face to face, and I've said to her, you were out to pervert the course of justice. You were trying to influence the outcome of a criminal trial in favour of a very dangerous man, a man who threatened to kill one of his victims. He threatened to kill one of his victims, a 14-year-old boy, threatened to kill him. And they saw all this, and they still tried to they were trying to get him off the hook. He would have walked a free man out of the court. No jury would have convicted him it would have been my word against his, and the other lad's word against his. And we wouldn't have known about each other. It was a nasty, diabolical action on the part of that judge, Gemma Loughlin. And she knows it. She is not, I've written to her, I've confronted her face to face, she wouldn't even look at me. She wouldn't even look at me. And my letters have gone without even an acknowledgement of receipt. Yeah. Not even an acknowledgement of receipt. So she knows that she hasn't a leg to stand on. Otherwise, she would bury me in litigation. She would.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's not the sort of person who would take this, what I've said to her, if I was in the wrong and I checked it out, I checked it out with top legal people and they said, no, she should not have been on that case and she knows it. She meddled and she tried to stop you getting justice, and to sever your cases was nasty. That's the word of a top legal person in the north of Ireland.
Whoa.
So anyway, I was left absolutely stunned, and I was psyched up to give evidence, and it was a horrible year, 2011. It rumbled on, and we were told several times the trial's going to start in March, new judge will be found by May. It didn't happen until November, mid-November, when a new judge took the case, and he was a true judge. He was an impartial, good man, and I felt safe with him. I knew looking at him that I'm safe with you. And the trial started. I was the first to give evidence. Went on for 3 days, but what had also happened, thank God, what had also happened, the lad whose case was not prosecuted in 2006 was joined onto our case.
So you were three, the three of you.
There were now three. Three. Because he was telling the same stories as us too.
Yeah.
And it was no longer his word against Donaghy's word. And there was now enough evidence to have a trial. So it went on for a month. Giving evidence was horrific. Yeah. Absolutely horrific. I had to go into the details of the abuse that I had never gone into, except with a therapist. Oh. And not even with my best friend had I ever gone into the details. And I had to stand up in a witness box and tell all the horrible details and describe what he had done, and then be cross-examined by a most aggressive, nasty defense lawyer, his lawyer.
How old were you at that moment?
At that time, it was 2011, I was 49, 48. Yeah. And so I was there for 3 days, and I was violently, physically sick at times. The judge wanted to stop one time because he had heard during the interval at lunchtime that I had been violently sick. And I couldn't eat. I wasn't eating anything, so it was retching. It was nerves. It was dry retching. And the judge wanted me to stop, and he says, "Do you want to take a break today?" And I says, "No, bring it on, bring it on." And I didn't take a break, and I did the 3 days, and the defense lawyer tried everything to undermine me, to mix me up, to confuse me. He called me a liar. He called me a fantasist, a gay fantasist. He called me.
Oh my God!
It was horrific. But I just kept right back at you. And in the end, in sheer frustration, when he was finished, he couldn't get the better of me. After 3 days, he had a massive big file, and he banged it down on the table or the desk, and he just, in utter frustration, said, "No more questions." And that was me free. And when I was going to step down, I just turned around. Donaghy was up in the dock. I hadn't looked at him or looked near him the whole 3 days that I was in that court, and I pointed up to him and I said, "See you, Mr. Donaghy, you have no more power over me. You have no more power over me."
So what did that do with you? What did that do with you that you could do that?
It was very empowering. It was power. And I just looked at him, straight at him, and his face was full of fright and also fury. Fright and fury on the same face. Yeah. So that was that. And the other victims came up to give evidence too, and Donaghy himself took the stand and laughed and joked with the jury and with the people. But when the verdict came back on the 14th of December 2011, guilty. He was found guilty. There was one or two things that were not to do with me that were left on the books, or there was a charge of physical assault with victim B that couldn't be proven or something. Yeah. But generally everything, he was found guilty. He was remanded. His lawyer wanted him out for a family wedding, and the judge says, "No, you can expect a lengthy prison sentence. You're going into jail, and you can expect I'll bring you back for sentencing in the new year, but under no circumstances are you going out on bail." So he was taken away in handcuffs. I wasn't there, but my best friend was there. A couple of my best friends were there, I didn't go. I stayed in town. I sat in a coffee shop, and my friend texted me at a certain, I think it was about 5 o'clock or after 5 o'clock in the evening. It was December, it was nearly Christmas. My friend just texted me a single word: guilty, guilty. And so that was that. I mean, he was guilty. He was brought back for sentencing on the 10th of February 2012. He was given 10 years in jail for what he did to us. And a year or two later, I think it was in 2013, the wee boy, 7, he pleaded guilty to that. And he was given a 2-year concurrent sentence to run. He pleaded guilty to this child.
Yeah.
He spared that child the ordeal of having to give evidence, but he didn't spare me and the other two lads, you know.
Bastard.
Yeah.
And it's like, 10 years is nothing from the time that he's taken up all your lives.
Yeah, and he still is. But it's going to change now. He was obviously he was dismissed from the priesthood by the Pope in 2015.
Yeah.
But he only served 5.5 years. He's out of jail now. Last year.
Oh.
Yeah, he's out. Well, he's out. Yeah, he's out. It's a joke, but I mean, it doesn't bother me the fact that justice was served. That he'd be on the sex offenders register for the rest of his life.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't get better after he was found guilty and jailed. I got worse. I went down and down and down. I nearly died. I nearly killed myself with alcohol. I was drinking myself to death. I was worse. I was worse than I ever had been. 100 times worse. And he was in jail. And I thought you got justice. You maybe got closure, but I didn't. No, it was terrible. And it got worse and worse and worse. And I was put on a very strong antidepressant by a doctor, which I have now been told I should never have been prescribed, called Seroquel, which is kind of like antipsychotic, and I was not psychotic by any means. But one of the consequences of this drug was weight gain, and I gained a massive amount of weight. I was never heavy in my life. I was never more than 9 stone, 10 stone in my life, in my adult life. All of a sudden, I was about 19 stone, and it was horrendous. I hated it. It was absolutely, I couldn't do the thing. I was always very active. I was in the gym several times a week. I walked and ran everywhere, and I couldn't do anything. Now, I think what happened, I was frozen. I was encased. The real me was encased in this large person that was not me.
Yeah.
And that went on, that carried that weight. I wasn't too bad. I'd stopped the alcohol and I was living again, and I was kind of happy-ish, and I got into like sleeping better and stuff like that. I still had the eating disorder though, even though I was massively overweight, But on the 18th of February 2021, I had to go to the doctor because I could hardly walk. I was crippled with pains and all that, and I was prescribed with arthritis in my left knee, but they took my blood pressure, and it was so high they were going to send me over to the emergency room. Oh. It was high. And they said, if this doesn't come down in the next number of 20 minutes, 15 minutes, we're going to have to send you across to the hospital, to the Royal Victoria Hospital. And I think I was anxious and whatever. It came down a little bit. And they prescribed a tablet for me for blood pressure, which I had to go and immediately get the prescription at the chemist. And while I was going into the chemist, there was a glass door, and I saw myself a reflection, and I said, "That's not you. That is not Paddy. Paddy, you were never like this. What happened? How did this happen?" And I felt as if descended upon me a grace, and a calm voice within to me whispered into me, "You're going to change this. You're going to get your real self back." And I decided, and I said, "You're doing it today, not tomorrow. You're going home, you have a treadmill in your bedroom that you got with all good intentions, and you have hardly ever been on it. So you're going home today, you're getting on that treadmill, and you're starting to change all this, because this is Donaghy's last legacy to you, and it will kill you if you don't do something. So I got the prescription and took the medication, and I started on the treadmill. I could hardly walk. I was only going at about 3 kilometers per hour. I did 15 minutes. I did that for every day, 15 minutes. I built it up. 20 minutes, it gets faster. 25 minutes, 45 minutes. Kept at it, didn't give up. Looked at diet. I heard about the keto diet, KETO, cutting out carbs. I went back to the doctors at the end of April, and